welcome to All In, the Running Man Retrospective. Who loves you and who do you love? It's John Scott, and hello cutie pie to Matt Essex, my other co-host here. How you doing, Matt, as we get into the Running Man on our retrospective series in the All In? How you doing, Matt?
Yeah, I'm good. No, I'm ready to get into this because this movie show has got a lot to offer, and I definitely think it splits the audience. Definitely, I mean, it's one of those movies where either kind of really love it, or you didn't have a lot of love for it in the end.
Yeah.
There was no one walking away from the cinemas going, I was 50-50.
Absolutely. Directed by Paul Michael Glaser. Produced by George Linder, screenplay Stephen E. D'Souza, and based on The Running Man, written, of course, by Richard Buckman, aka none other than Stephen King, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Richard Dawson, and as we get into this, we're going to find out a little bit about these characters, but what not a lot of people realise, Matt, when they've seen The Running Man from the 1987, is it's not a lot of people don't realise it is a Stephen King book, to the point where the guy that actually purchased the rights to the book, he didn't even know that it was written by Stephen King either at the time, even though at that time it had come out that Buckman was Stephen King. He did not realise that was him at that time, and he was kind of wondering why is this so much money? Why is this costing me so much to get this book? That's the reason why, and for kind of legal reasons and all stuff like that, they tried to, in many ways, try to get Stephen King's name on the trailers, but they just couldn't get round it. Believe me, they would have tried to have done that as much as they could, just for the publicity of saying it's a Stephen King film or from the book, but they couldn't get the right. They just couldn't do it legally that way. So this become it's not something that people go, that's a Stephen King film. Now we look at it and we say it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger film without question. The movie is Arnold Schwarzenegger all over. And I think that's where most people's perception comes from. But it's interesting to a fault that even the guy that bought it didn't even realise that where this was coming from, and that this was from the creative and the imaginative mind of one of the best authors of all time, of course, of the horror, Stephen King. Matt, are you surprised? When did you learn that was the case, and that there was a Stephen King book, novel, before anything?
It definitely was later in my life when I realised that. I mean, not until at least in my 20s, and when I first originally watched it, I was much younger, about, I'd say I was about 12, 13 when I watched it originally, so it definitely came as a bit of a surprise. I mean, I wasn't digging around for the information or anything. I just picked it up and read the back of the cover and everything, and there was no indication that it was linked with King. And of course, I wasn't that heavily into books back then, so it definitely did take me by surprise to find that out.
Yeah, likewise. I definitely did not think of this. I know that it does say based on the story of Richard Buckman in the film, but at that time, I didn't even know he was Stephen King at that time. So even though it does show up on the credits into this film, I don't think most people, if you weren't a buff into books, you weren't going to look at that and go, "Yep, Stephen King." Definitely not. So the main star of this film, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who would have just come off the back of a very successful Predator film when that hit earlier in 1987. So this is coming after that in 1987. It's worth pointing out that they were looking at other actors for that part. In particular, Matt, read some of these names off for you. Dolph Lundgren was one of the names that was tipped the hat for the role of Ben Richards. Not only that, Christopher Reeve, who also was interested in this movie. And if you want to go even more detailed on that, Patrick Swayze. a little bit out of left field there. That would have been an interesting take on Ben Richards as Patrick Swayze, I'm sure. But for him to be doing stuff like, but I suppose Patrick Swayze had that background of the martial arts stuff, so maybe it would have, the film that this came across as, it might have suited him. You never know. So I'm going to give the plot for the beginning of this film, folks. Just want to let everybody know before we dive into this that yes, there will be spoilers in this retrospective. So if you haven't seen the film, you want to see the film before you listen to us, go ahead and watch the film, come back to us by all means, because we will be talking about all the plots and spoilers and plot holes, etc., etc. But I'm going to give a brief introduction to, I guess, the world that we're coming into here, and then from there on we'll kind of take over from where the film kicks up. But yeah, funny enough, it's 2017, Matt, where this all begins. That's the plot. After a worldwide economic collapse, the US has become a police state censoring all cultural activity. The US government is on top of everything. They're authorizing and broadcasting game shows where they're now putting criminals to fight for their lives, including gladiator-style The Running Man, hosted by the ruthless Damon Killian, where runners attempt to evade stalkers, armed mercenaries around a large arena. And yeah, they face near certain death for a chance to, get out, if you will, scot-free in all this. By 2019, Ben Richards, a police helicopter pilot, wrongly convicted of a massacre during a food riot in none other than Bakersfield, California, escapes from a labour camp with two resistant fighters, and basically he then gets picked up, and he obviously gets thrown into this world that is the Running Man, the game show that is kind of this big network which is called ICS, and it's run by a producer and host, none other than Killian. So that's the kind of plot where we're coming into this, Matt. I didn't quite realise it was 2017 that this started. I guess it starts there when we get the helicopter start at the beginning. But was you surprised it was 2017? I know it's a little bit ironic that we're doing this year, but kind of made me smile when I saw that, because I guess back in 1987, what's that, 30 years? I mean, that's like, I guess the imagination was definitely wandering into all kinds of realms. But, as well as that, I know it is a little bit out there. I think it's worth pointing out that this film, they did have an anniversary box set that came out recently. I don't know if you came across that, Matt, that special edition that there was. But there was a 30th anniversary in 2017 this year that's come out, and it was cited by the BBC journalist as having made accurate predictions about life in 2017, including the economic collapse, the offering and enduring critique of American television culture. The film writer Stephen DeSouza himself also predicted a lot of things in his podcast interview about the motherboard and stuff like that. So, it's not like, although it is kind of far-fetched, I kind of feel like the world we're living in now it is going that way, certainly with the whole TV, because you've got to remember, this is before American Gladiators come out. This is before reality TV was even a thing. So I kind of feel like they have done like a really good job considering what's come next. The only thing I think their influences came from in this, I would say there's a bit of WWF involved with all this. Some of the characters, some of those stalkers. But I think other than that, this is more of it's not a bad take. I know it's not quite that bad, but LA isn't quite like that is, and Bakersfield are not having rights over food. But I feel like the satire they've put in, it's the whole TV aspect is probably on course going that way. How's your take on that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible just how many things they did pick up on, and of course, they always make the future look a bit bleak in movies like this. But yeah, I think to an adequate level, actually, they actually predicted quite a lot of it. And like you said about the reality TV aspect, I mean, how much further are we going to go with reality TV? It does seem to go a little bit more extreme each time. And we do have shows now where we just sit and watch people, and sometimes you do sit there and just want to see the people fail. So it's not that much of a stretch to believe that this could happen in another 30 years. It might have just been 60 years rather than 30 years what they predicted. Of course, in the book, I believe it's the year 2025.
Yes,
I think they changed that for some reason, but there's still a way to go under those circumstances.
Yeah. Let's not hold our breath there, because that could potentially happen. Let's hope not. But before we start getting into this, before we start moving into the film, what I've got to ask you this, Matt. Are you an Arnold? You're either loving this guy or you don't love this guy. Like people, his acting is at best sometimes limited, but if you like Arnold, you kind of you take him for who he is. He's the action guy. You are going to get those cheesy one-liners. Are you an Arnold fan, Matt?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, he's a one-dimensional actor, but that dimension, he's nailed it. If it comes to an action star, he is the number one all-time action star. I wouldn't put anyone else in that category other than him.
When was the first time you came across this film? Do you remember watching this for the first time? What your initial reaction was to it the first time you ever saw it, or can you not remember that far back?
Yeah, I do remember. I mean, like when I was little, my friend, he had a huge DVD library. Mm-hmm. You've even met him. You know the guy I'm talking about. His DVD library was like extensive, and it was not even that. It was videos, I believe, before that, and he had loads of them. And every night, because I would be there around there quite often, we'd have to choose a film out for to watch, and because he had all the Arnold ones, it was a pretty easy choice just to go through the whole Arnold collection, and this was one of them. And when I saw it, I wasn't disappointed.
I can imagine you wasn't. I am an Arnold fan. I was definitely an Arnold fan growing up. I was definitely a kid that was drawn to Arnold. I'd seen him in many films such as Terminator and Predator, and Running Man. I didn't get round to watching Running. That was probably one of the more later films I saw. Probably that and maybe a couple of these other ones that you don't like, Raw Deal, just because it was Arnold. And, most of Arnold's films always had his, the Schwarzenegger name right at the top of the box set. So you always knew that was Arnold. And that was a go-to for me. I would probably just pick it up on name value that it was Arnold. And this was no different. I've got to say that the title of it, probably being so young, I kind of thought, The Running Man? Is this like an Olympics thing? What is this? I really didn't know what the hell I was letting myself into until I obviously started to watch it, and obviously it was what it was. Now, when this came out, there were a lot of mixed reviews about it, most of them quite negative, and I think even the die-hard Arnold fans, after seeing Predator, they kind of felt like the reaction was, we want a little bit more of a more serious Arnold than what we got in The Running Man. So I kind of feel like he's quite big at this point because he's coming off of the film. He hasn't quite got to the T2 level yet, but he is on course. And the Predator done him no harm at all. That really buffed up stuff. So I think there was a lot of people expecting a lot of big things in this. And I'm not saying it's, we're going to get to the whole sum up of this film at the end, but I do feel like in this film, Arnold I think he's still at the stage where he's probably finding himself out a little bit as well. And I'm not, some of those lines are really cheesy, but now you watch them back, they're absolutely fantastic. But we're going to get into it. So I want to start off and we get the whole opening lines, and we get to read a lot of dialogue basically going on.